So we're talking about integrity this month. And I want to clarify a few things before we get started. And I'm going to do that by reading you two definitions of the word integrity. The first definition is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness. So there's an interesting phenomenon that's been happening, probably the last dozen years. This idea of integrity has become really important in corporate America and in spiritual communities and a lot of other places. And when I say important, what I mean is it's become an arrow with which people look at each other and go, "You're out of integrity." Now, if you've never had the experience of someone telling you that you're out of integrity, let me just tell you in advance how to respond to that. If they say you're out of integrity, you say you're out of here. It's completely unhelpful, right? To hurl something like this label called integrity at another person and say, "And you're not in it." That's not the kind of integrity we're going to be talking about this month. What we're going to talk about this month is the second definition of integrity. And that is, verbatim from Merriam-Webster, the state of being whole and undivided. The state of being whole and undivided. We're going to look at the lens, look through the lens, using material from a book called The Inward Journey by Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman. So we're going to use that book all month, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Dr. Thurman was. He was born in the late 1800s, I think. 1899. And he was born in the South with everything that meant if you were born in the late 1800s. I think he was born in Alabama, actually, maybe Mississippi. In spite of all the odds, he finished school, went to college, got his doctorate of divinity, and he became the chaplain at Howard University's chapel, and then the chapel at Boston University. And that was all in the 30s. In the mid-40s, Dr. Thurman went to San Francisco and established the first interracial church in America. And you know, he mentored a lot of people, one of whom was Martin Luther King. But he was a brilliant theologian. And have you ever read a book that as you're reading it, it actually conveys to you the feeling that they're describing in the book? Yeah, that's a little bit how I find reading Howard Thurman. He wrote some 20 books, I think, maybe a few more. Extraordinary man, extraordinary life, and his heartfulness has been a tremendous influence on my own worldview. All right. So again, as I said, the book that we're using this month is called The Inward Journey. And we're talking about being whole and undivided. And I'm going to call that deep integrity to distinguish it from something a little more superficial, I guess. Here's a quote from the essay in that book called A Life at Cross Purposes. There's nothing more exhausting for the person than the constant awareness that his life is being lived at cross purposes. At such moments, the individual seems to himself ever to be working against himself. What he longs for is the energy that comes from a concentration of his forces in a single direction toward a single end. So I'm going to read just that first line again, okay? There is nothing more exhausting than for a person to have the constant awareness that her life is being lived at cross purposes. Now, he goes on to talk about what might be the causes of cross purposes. And let me just give you, this will give you a real feel for what he's talking about here. I can give you an example from my own life. You know, Michael and I have a 7-year-old, and she had a soccer game at 5 o'clock last night. It was cold, and I was sleepy. I didn't want to go. I wanted to be in front of the fire and be warm. But my daughter had a game, and so it sets up a little rub. And I have to decide which of those is of higher value to me, right? So that's cross purposes on a very small scale. You know, the alarm goes off. You have to get up and go to work. You don't want to get up. Cross purposes. Okay, so Howard Thurman says that sometimes we're gifted in so many areas that we find ourselves at cross purposes. Lisa Umbarger is a great example of this. She has a lot of artistic talent. She's a musician and a painter, and she can draw, and I've seen her be at cross purposes with herself, being pulled between her talents because they're so abundant. That's a high-class problem, by the way. Then he has something he calls circumstances will not yield to intent, meaning you feel like you understand your purpose, and yet your life just won't allow it. Maybe you have a child, and you feel very strongly that it's time for you to go to the Australian outback for 3 months and go on a walkabout. You may feel that to the depth of your being, and yet you have a responsibility at home. So he goes on to say other duties, the fear of being misunderstood puts us at cross purposes with ourselves, the fear of being judged. And here's the big one for me. It's kind of captured in this E. Cummings quote that I like a lot. He says, I arise in the morning with a desire to improve the world and enjoy the world. It makes it very hard to plan the day. Right? So cross purposes, those things that they churn us up. They create a lot of discomfort. And when I first found Science of Mind and Spirit, a dozen years or more ago, I heard a speaker. And she said something that was sort of revolutionary for me. Now, most of this is common sense. But sometimes, what is it? Was it Thomas Paine that said common sense is not so common? Right? So the speaker said, when you have many things that you value, at any one time you must resolve to your highest value. Now that's common sense. Do I want to stay in bed or be on time for work? Do I want to participate in raising my child and get all the feel good even though it's short-term challenging, or do I want to go to the Australian outback? Do I want to take a job that pays less money so that I can, but that fulfills me, or do I want to go for the high-paying job because I can do anything for 5 years to build my retirement? You see what I'm saying? It's common sense. But for some reason, when this speaker said it, I heard her in a different way. Now, I heard her say it. I went back into my life, and over the next 6 months, looking back, it's astonishing the number of things that I lost. Friendships, relationships, all kinds of a job. It was as if That understanding was a lightning rod for change in my life. So what Howard Thurman says, and the reason that happened is because I started looking at things and recognizing that I had to start valuing myself first, right? And that there was a lot of places in my life where I was incongruent, where I was giving with nothing in return. I realized at the time, for example, I had a call to ministry. And my partner at the time said, well, I'll do anything in the world except be the spouse of a minister. Right? I guess the overall takeaway that I got was I could no longer do I had to rearrange my values. Right? So Howard Thurman says this: at long last, the only redemption from the paralysis of the cross purpose is to seek with all possible intent to link one's deepest desire with one's choice and goal, and to make one's life a dedication to such an end. At long last, the only redemption from the paralysis of cross purpose is to seek with all possible intent to link one's deepest desire with one's choice of goal, and to make one's life a dedication to such an end. So what he's saying here is he's saying we've got to get into alignment with ourselves, and we actually have to work at it. We have to make it a priority to get in line with ourselves, which means we have to give up the idea that we can go along to get along. We have to give up the idea that we can chip off little pieces of our being and give them away. Because remember, integrity is to be whole and undivided. Now, that's not to say if I make the choice to work for less money, or if I make the choice to do a 2-week walkabout instead of a 3-month walkabout that I want. See, I can make a choice like that and feel whole in it. But there are too many times when we don't make a choice. We just go along to get along. And that's the kind of thing that we're just taking pieces of ourselves and we're giving them away. And then we wake up and wonder, where did I go? Where have I gone? Howard Thurman goes on to say, ultimately a man's responsibility is to God. The God a man worships is the God he must face, and when he stands before him, what shall he say? So I want to translate that into New Thought speak, because for some people that language is a little bit challenging. I find it somewhat challenging because I don't have a God that's going to require, I swear I feel like this. Well, I mean, I feel, I grew up Catholic and I feel this like, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 6 months since my last confession. I am guilty of, some kind of like, I'm just like, oh, right? So let me reword that. The highest most God and the innermost God are one God. That's a direct quote from Ernest Holmes. The highest most God and the innermost God are one God. So there is this sense of congruence, alignment, or integrity with one's highest self. And at every moment at every day, if you think your highest self has gone to sleep, you are making a serious mistake, right? Because the knower knows that within us that is most in touch with our divine identity, with our divine wholeness, never goes to sleep, right? And what we find when we're out of alignment with that is we walk around in our lives with the hum of dissonance that we can't quite shake. So we're going to say that this God that we have to stand before, instead of standing before the God of our childhood, we are actually standing within our own wholeness, and we are either whole and undivided or we are wobbling in dissonance. So if you read enough Howard Thurman and if you read enough Ernest Holmes, you will find them say the same thing. How do we find out what's whole and undivided for us? We have to go into the closet and pray. Okay? So again, let me do a little interpretation here. Actually, I'm going to let Ernest Holmes do the interpretation, and I'm going to read you something he says in the glossary of the Science of Mind and Spirit textbook about silence. Silence. This word is used oftener and perhaps less understood than any one word in the terminology of the metaphysician. There's no place we must go for the silence. There's no posture we must assume. There's no formula we must repeat. We enter this inner tabernacle by whatever route we may. Some people live in such conscious unity with good that instantly they can turn within and direct the avenues they wish the good to take. Others need to approach by prayer, by singing, by reading a verse from the Bible, by repeating an inspirational poem. If we know that God is forever right where we are, we won't be reaching out in every direction for him or her. We enter the inner chamber of our mind and close the door on all discord and confusion and commune with our God, our spiritual consciousness. So all of the metaphors, so from Islam we have the cave of the heart, from the Sufi tradition, the cave of the heart. Go in the closet and pray. Die to the mat from Zen Buddhism. You see, there's all of these things that are metaphors for coming to a place of inward awareness where we can hear clearly the still small voice that tells us what our highest value in any one moment is. And this happens on a grand scheme, like, which direction do I want my life to take? And it happens when you wake up in the morning and you're like, I really want to sleep for 5 more minutes, but it's going to make me late. Right? So on matters large and small, at every scale, in every way, in each moment, we get to choose what our highest value is and resolve to that. With me so far? Okay. So now I'm going to read you the poetic prose from this book called Moments of High Resolve. I'm going to say a few more things and then we'll be all done with that. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Despite the dullness and barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can always find a deposit left by some former radiance. But I had forgotten. At the time it was full-orbed, glorious and resplendent. I was sure that I would never forget. In the moment of its fullness, I was sure that it would illumine my path for all the rest of my journey. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. There was no intent to betray what seemed so sure at the time. My response was whole, clean, authentic. But little by little, there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey. Details, lower level demands, all kinds of cross currents. Nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant. Just wear and tear. If there had been some direct challenge, a clear-cut issue, I would have fought to the end and beyond. So in the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or in foul, in good times or in tempests, in the days when the darkness and the foe are nameless or familiar. I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me moments of my high resolve. So what is he... There is the still small voice. There is the high self, the divine self, the perfected self, the whole self. It's with us always. And it usually has a pretty good idea about what the right thing to do or be or say or pursue is. But we forget to listen, or it seems inconvenient for all the reasons that Thurman listed and more. And we get the dust and the grit of our everydayness on us, when what we most want is a break or some ice cream or some rest, right? And that's okay sometimes, but we don't want to get so bogged down in the short-termness of our days that we lose alignment with the deepest, highest, most vast, and most knowing parts of ourselves. I was debating on whether a suggested homework assignment is called for. But I don't think it is. I think I'm just going to let the talk be enough this week and pray us out. So a prayer by Ernest Holmes. Sweet song of the silence, forever singing in my heart. Words cannot express, the tongue cannot tell. Only the heart knows the songs which were never sung, the music which was never written. I have heard that great harmony and felt that great presence. I have listened to the silence, and in the deep places of life I have stood naked and receptive to thy songs, and they have entered my soul. I am lost in the mighty depths of thy calm and inner peace. So remembering that the God that we pray to is the God that we pray from, because the highest most God and the innermost God are one. One life, one spirit, one true divine identity, perfectly unified, perfectly multiplied. And so I affirm and declare in this moment that there is that within me that knows, there is that within each of us that knows who and what we came here to be, who and what our highest value, our highest form of expression is. And although I'm not fond of the word obedience, if there's anything to be obedient to, it is this. This soul clarity and spiritual strength that comes from allowing the deep alignment of my thoughts and my words and my deeds to the God presence that I claim. So for this and so much more, I say thank you. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. Thank you, life. And I know that as I see this in myself, my eyes are changed and I see it in the world and in everyone I encounter. And in this way, my own congruence, my own integrity becomes a blessing to the world. So I say thank you. And so it is.